بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
I thank you immensely for your patience. But this is important because this is being recorded and this will be of great value to new Muslims and for Muslims who are confused about this issue. I'm not looking to convert or brainwash anybody. I'm just looking to express our understanding. And I know many of you understand this and might be thinking, why are you trying to convince me? I already believe in the concept. But it is important for us to also understand how we come to this understanding and conclusion. This is very, very important. These are the kind of things we want to teach our children in the madrasa as well. So that when they discuss this, we don't want people just saying, oh, the Shias, breakaway sect from Islam, believe in their imams, as if it's something fanciful and emotional that we came to conclude. It was a breakaway, it was a political movement, something in history, a group of heretics. No, there are theological proofs for this. There are necessities of religion that depend on this understanding of imamate. So now we went back to our Muslim brothers and we said, fine, you have told us what the qualities of an imam must be. You have told us that an imam's imamate is never nullified. Now, have we agreed until this point that imamate is wajib? Having an imam is wajib. They say yes, having an imam is wajib. We say, tell us why is it wajib to have an imam? Why is it obligatory to have an imam? Now listen to this. It's a very involved but an interesting discussion. You see, the Sunni Muslims in the past used to be of two theological understandings. They used to have the Asharis and the Mu'tazilis. The Mu'tazilis were very close to the Shias in their understanding. They produced some great scholars. The famous Mufassir of Quran, Fakhruddin Razi, was a Mu'tazili. Ibn Abi al-Hadid, who wrote the Sharh of Najul Balagha, was a Mu'tazili. But the Mu'tazilites are to all purpose and intent extinct now. They're very few, if any. Most, if not all, the Sunni Muslims you meet today are of an Ashari understanding. Okay? All of Saudi Arabia follows the Ashari school of understanding. So we have three opinions as to why imamat is wajib. We have the Ash'ari opinion, we have the Mu'tazili opinion, and then we have the Shia opinion. We asked the Ash'aris, why is an imam, what makes imamat wajib? They said, tajibul imama sam'an. Imamat is wajib because we hear of it. Meaning what? Meaning we proved imamat to be wajib because of history. So we say, how did you prove imamat is wajib through history? Now here's what they say. They say, the Prophet of Islam did not appoint anyone. After he passed away, Medina was grieving. People were weeping on one side, confused on the other. People thought this is the end of Islam. There was so much shock because people never thought the Prophet would pass away, perhaps. Some of the companions could not believe he had passed away. In particular, all books of history says that Umar ibn al-Khattab pulled out his sword and said, if anyone says Rasulullah has died, I will behead him. And he continued saying that until Abu Bakr came, he went inside, he lifted the cloth, he looked at the face of the Prophet, he confirmed the Prophet has passed away. Then he came back, he calmed Umar down, he recited an ayat of Quran, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا الرَّسُولُ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ إِنْ قَلَبْتُمْ عَلَىٰ أَعْقَابِكُمْ. Muhammad was but a messenger. If he dies or is killed in battle, will you turn on your heels and die? After saying all that, he said, هَذَا مُحَمَّدٌ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ قَدْ مَاتَ. This is Muhammad, the slave of God, he has died. وَأَمَّا رَبُّ مُحَمَّدٍ فَلَنْ يَمُوتْ. As for the Lord of Muhammad, he shall never die. In other words, we must now continue to keep this mission alive. We must continue to keep what the Prophet brought and stood for and preserve it and guide the Muslim Ummah. And so, because of these historic events, the need for an imam was felt. This is why imamat is wajib. Do you understand? Now, we said to them, when was this need felt? When did you feel this need? They say the need was felt almost immediately. So immediate that even the Prophet's body could not be washed. There were 8 people only to wash the body of the Prophet, and there were only 6 to bury him. At Ghadir there were 100,000. So the need for an Imam was felt with such urgency, with such immediateness, that immediately the Muslims went and gathered at Saqifah and began deciding the fate of the Ummah. We say, if this urgency was so great, why didn't the Prophet say anything about it? If it's wujub, if it's being wajib was so great that even the Prophet could not be washed and an Imam was needed, how could Allah and His Messenger ignore this? This Rasul, who has told you that even when you go to the washroom, what is wajib, what is haram, what is makruh, what is mustahab, how could He ignore something like this? Now, I want you to listen to this very, very carefully. There are 3 options. Option number 1, Rasulullah appointed someone. Option number 2, he was silent, he didn't appoint anyone. Option number 3, he wasn't silent, he specifically spoke about it, but he said, I am not appointing someone because Allah does not want me to appoint someone. And He wants me to leave this in the affairs of the Ummah. Allah will decide Himself what will happen next. Now get this very, very clearly in your minds. There is no narration, not even a weak one, neither in the Shia books nor in the Sunni books, that the Prophet of Islam said, I am not appointing someone. If he was silent, he should have at least said, here's why I'm not appointing someone. There is no hadith that he said, I'm not appointing someone. So now you're left with 2 options. Either he appointed someone, or he chose to remain silent. If he appointed someone, who did he appoint? If he would have said, I am not appointing someone, then the natural response to that is people would have asked him, what should we do then? He would have said, choose one yourselves. Then the people would have said, what criteria should we use to choose someone? Right? So the only option then, from a non-Shia perspective, is that the Prophet was silent. If the Prophet was silent and did not say anything, then we must assume he did not want anyone appointed. In which case, for the Muslims to appoint someone was bid'ah. We don't use this term too much, but it comes in handy. It is an innovation. It is an innovation because Rasulullah did not want anyone appointed. If you say it is not bid'ah, then is it sunnah? If it is sunnah, then again it is not wajib. At least you should have washed the body of the Prophet and dealt with it after. They say, no, it couldn't. It had to be dealt with right away. Then it means it's wajib. If it's wajib, then number 1, how do you prove it is wajib? From Quran or from Hadith? And number 2, if it is wajib, how could Allah and His Messenger neglect something that was wajib? So you come back again to the same question. Now in the interest of time, I have to keep forging ahead. We leave this for a moment. We go to the Mu'tazilis. We said to the Mu'tazilis, is imamat wajib? They say yes. How do you prove imamat is wajib? They say, tajibul imama aqlan. Imamat is wajib based on reasoning, not based on history. Very good. Reasoning, we like reasoning. So now we say to them, our response. If imamat is wajib based on reasoning, based on whose reasoning? Your reasoning or the reasoning of Rasulullah? If you say that your reasoning determined that imamat was wajib, but the Prophet kept silent, then it means your reasoning is superior to the reasoning of Rasulullah. Because you are able to determine something is wajib, but he was not. You realized it is necessary, it escaped him. And if you say it is wajib based on the reasoning of Rasulullah, Then if it was wajib, why did he not say about it? Why was he quiet? So that doesn't appeal to us. So they turn around and say, fine, then you tell us, what makes imamat wajib? We say, imamat is wajib not because of historical reasons, not because of rationalizing, but because it is a lutf of Allah. Now you need to understand the meaning of the word lutf. In Arabic, lutf means grace. Lutf of Allah is the grace of Allah, benevolence of Allah. The sun He creates is His lutf. The animals who are born with claws to protect themselves, that's their lutf from Allah. So lutf of Allah, or the grace of Allah, is that which Allah makes available. That which is not obligatory on Allah to do, because nothing is obligatory on Him, nothing is wajib on Him, but that which is necessary for Him to provide, because if He does not provide, it points fingers at His justice. That is called lutf. So we say imamat is lutf from Allah. What we mean by this is, even though Allah is not compelled to provide an imam, His justice requires that He makes that available to human beings. Why? Because if Allah has decided He is not sending any more prophets and messengers, and if Allah has decided He is not sending any other revelation, and the Quran is the final revelation, but He wants the world to continue after this messenger, then it is necessary, and if Allah has decided that on the day of judgment He will reward and punish people based on their practice of what He has revealed, and He considers it His justice to punish you if you disobey the teachings of the Quran, then His justice also demands that He also makes someone available to guide and interpret that Quran and preserve its message, so that Allah can then truly say on the day of judgment, I was fair and just to you. If He does not make such a person available, then it points fingers at His justice. Because everything cannot be interpreted directly from the Quran, even if some of the Sahaba thought, Hasbuna kitab Allah. And there are lots and lots of examples that I can give you. Lots. I'll give you two very quick examples. When Abu Bakr was the caliph, a man was caught for drinking alcohol, wine. He was brought, and the caliph wanted to punish him according to Islamic Sharia. But he had to have his day in court. He said to the caliph, I used to live in a community that used to drink wine, and we never knew that there was an ayat of Quran about the prohibition of drinking wine. Today was the first time I heard about this ayat of Quran. So when I drank, I didn't know it was haram. And the books of hadith say that the caliph did not know how to deal with this case, because the man was right. Give you another example. During the caliphate, the second caliphate, the caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab, a man came to him and said to him that, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, in Islam there is a law that says, if you divorce your wife 3 times, you cannot take her back. During the days of Jahiliyyah before Islam, I divorced my wife twice. After Islam came and we became Muslims, I have divorced my wife once. So do I still have 2 more chances, or have I used up my 3rd chance? It's a valid question. The caliph could not find the answer in the Quran. He said to him, La anhaka wala amurak. I neither forbid you nor do I permit you. What do you do with that? It's like the other story of the man who had something in his mouth and he was told, you can't swallow it, you can't spit it out. It just stays in your mouth. But that's another story. So there has to be someone who understands Quran after Rasul, who can preserve this message, and therefore imamat is the lutf of Allah. Now if you say imamat is the lutf of Allah, then what is the corollary to that? Corollary means if you put forward a theory, then what does that imply? Right? What does that then lead to? Once you say imamat is a necessity from Allah as a grace, then the corollary to that is that the Imam cannot be appointed by election or consensus. That Imam must also be appointed by Allah. It must also be mansus min Allah, either directly or through His messenger. Because Allah then will know who is able to fulfill His lutf so that no one can point fingers at His justice. So this is our understanding. Now, there is still one discussion I have to make very quick, and then I will make a conclusion. I know it has been heavy going, and tomorrow night as well it will be heavy going. I have to tell you this, because the nature of the subject is such. Now, we take our argument back once more. This is the final discussion I'm coming to. We go back to the Ashari. The Asharis are the majority today. We say to them, fine. For a moment, we are going to concede and say, yes, imamat is wajib because of history. Historic events led to the proof that imamat is wajib. The Prophet did not appoint anyone. Okay? It's not the lutf of Allah. History made it wajib. Fine. As long as we are agreed it's wajib. Now, the question we have is, how does an imam become confirmed as the imam? Supposing today I stand up and say, I'm the Khalifa of Rasulullah, I'm the imam. There has to be some way of confirming that I am or not. Those initial criteria are of no value, because we have seen I have to be just, but if I am unjust, my imamat is not taken away. So we said to them, how do you confirm the imamat of someone? They say, because the Prophet did not appoint anyone, it means he wanted the ummah to decide. Therefore, the consensus of the ummah decides who is the imam. Fair enough. We said, whose consensus from the ummah? Because the ummah is a large crowd. Even in the time of the Prophet, there was Muslims in Medina, in Basra, in Kufa, all over the place. Right? So whose consensus? They say, those people who have prominence, authority, and influence in the community, their consensus is what matters. These people in Arabic are called Ahlul Hilli wal Aqd. This is a good term to remember. Al-Hilli wal Aqd, Al-Halli wal Aqd. Hal is to untie something, right? To open, like you use hal of a mushkil, for example, right? Hal is to untie, Aqd is to tie. So Al-Halli wal Aqd, Ahl al-Halli wal Aqd are the people who untie and tie. It's just an expression. So in every community, even if you look at this community, for example, you might have the chairman, you might have the vice chairman, the secretary, and all the people who have positions. And then you'll have some people who don't have a position, but they have a status in the community and a certain influence, so that if they stand and speak, the community listens. And they can guide the community in a particular direction. And the leaders would respect their opinion. These are the Ahl al-Halli wal-Aqd, the people who untie and tie. So they said, these are the people who will decide. We said, fair enough. We agree with that as well. How many from Ahl al-Halli wal-Aqd do you need to confirm an imam? So the initial theologian said 5. I said, 5? How did you get the number 5? They said, when the Caliph Umar was dying, he appointed 6 people as a shura, and said, out of you 6, decide who will be the caliph amongst you. So 5 people decided that the caliph will be Uthman, even though we don't agree that all 5 agreed on that, because Imam Ali was one of them. But they say out of the 6, 5 decided. Therefore 5 people of prominence, because Umar chose 5 prominent people. We said, very well, that's fine as well. But the problem is that when Umar was elected, Abu Bakr elected him on his deathbed alone. So there was no 5 people, there was only 1. So then the theologians changed the rule. They said the consensus of 1 is enough. Consensus means 1 person, as long as he's a person of prominence and people respect his view. We said that is fine as well. But the problem is that when Abu Bakr was elected, there was no respect. There was a fight. So there was 1 individual who chose Abu Bakr, but again there was no the community's respect of the view of that 1 individual. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What happened with Saqifa was that Sa'ad bin Ubadah, who was the leader of the Khazraj tribe from the Ansar, set up a meeting. The Ansar wanted to elect Sa'ad as the caliph. In the meantime, Abu Bakr and Umar came to know that there is an election happening. They rushed to the scene to talk to them and start reasoning with them. The Ansar said, we select Sa'ad as our caliph. Abu Bakr stood up and said, you cannot, because this has to come from the Muhajir. The Ansar said, if it has to be from the Muhajir, then we will only accept Ali bin Abi Talib. Zubair bin al-Awam pulled out a sword. This is all from Tariq, not Shia Tariq. I told you the Sirah is not from the Shias. Zubair pulled out a sword at Saqifa. He said, I will not put this sword back unless people do bay'ah of Ali. Ali was the only person whose name was being taken in Saqifa, even though he was not there himself. This shows that people had an inclination to that. At this point, there was a commotion. People started arguing. The books of history say that Umar went and grabbed the sword of Zubair. He struck it on a stone. He broke the sword. They started calling each other names. The books of history says the Muslims behaved like the days of Jahiliyyah. Umar called Zubair a dog as well. He said, alaykum bil kalb. He pounced upon Sa'ad. Sa'ad was beaten. His ribs were broken. He died after a few days. In this commotion, in this fighting, what Umar did was, he said to Abu Bakr, extend your hand. Abu Bakr extended his hand. Umar put his hand and said, I do bay'ah of him. Now the Ansar were two tribes. As soon as he did, the person sitting next to him, he did bay'ah. Then the next person did bay'ah. Now the tribe of Aus began doing bay'ah of Abu Bakr. So those people of Khazraj said, now if we don't do bay'ah, we'll get left behind. So they started doing it. In that commotion, an election took place. Later on, when Umar became the caliph, he is reported to have said in the history books of the Muslims, and I quote his words, he says, Wallahi inna amra bay'ata Abi Bakrin kana faltatan. I swear by Allah, the affair of the allegiance to Abu Bakr was a mistake, was an error, and was a big mess. It was a falta. Faltatan is, you can check the dictionary. It means it's an error. It's a mistake. فَوَقَى اللَّهُ الْأُمَّةِ مِنْ شَرِّهَا. But Allah protected the ummah from its evil. And if anyone attempts to do anything like that again, I will behead him. Okay? This is what happened at Saqifa. So we come back to our discussion. We say, well, if you need one person's consensus, but that one person has to be respected unanimously, that did not happen in the case of Abu Bakr. So then they revise the condition. They say, as long as one person pledges allegiance, or some people pledge allegiance, it becomes wajib even if the others don't pledge allegiance to him. And now this comes from a very great theologian who is called Al-Juwayni. Al-Juwayni is the teacher of Ghazali. Those of you who take an interest in Islamic history, you know Ghazali is a very great personality in Islam. Imam al-Ghazali, probably the first person to be called Hujjatul Islam, al-Ghazali, the author of Ihya Ulumuddin. His teacher is Al-Juwayni. Al-Juwayni was known as Imam al-Haramain, Imam of Makkah and Medina. If you speak in Islamic theology and say Imam al-Haramain without taking a name, people know you're talking of Al-Juwayni. Al-Juwayni says, consensus is not necessary for an imam's imamate to be confirmed. بَلْ تَنْعَقِدُ الْإِمَامَ وَإِنْ لَمْ تُجْمَعَ الْأُمَّةِ عَلَىٰ عَقْدِهِ. But his imamate is confirmed even if the ummah do not unite and agree on his imamate. And notice he is not saying khilafat, he is saying imamate. This is very important. Now the Shias are very hard to keep quiet. We said that is also fine. We have another question. Now what do you say about Yazid and Muawiyah? Because Muawiyah took khilafat by force and treachery. So there was not even the one person who was elected by some and opposed by some. Ma'mun killed his brother Amin after his father Harun al-Rashid died in order to get khilafat. So now there is no even election of one prominent person, even if the Muslims are divided on it. So now how do you confirm his imamate? So finally they said, an imam's imamat is confirmed by any standard, even if he takes it with force and subjugation and oppression. So the mold just broke now completely. There is no yardstick now. And I want to give you 2 quotes, summarize, and then come to Masaib. The first quote is from Al-Isfara'ini. Al-Isfara'ini is a famous theologian, Sunni theologian. He has a book called Ihqaqul Haqq. He writes in his book Ihqaqul Haqq, Imamat is confirmed even with force and subjugation. And for those of you who understand Arabic, he says, وَلَوْ كَانَ فَاسِقًا أَوْ جَاهِلًا أَوْ أَعْجَمِيًا. Even if he is a transgressor, an open sinner, and he is ignorant, and he is non-Arab. So these 3 fall in one class. Ignorance, transgressors, and non-Arabs. Any of these. Because why? Originally, the rule was he must be from Quraysh. And At-Taftazani, whom we mentioned before, in his book, he says, the imamat of an imam is confirmed even bil-qahri wal-istila, with force and subjugation. In aqadat al-khilafatu lahu waqadha idha kana fasiqan aw jahilan. His imamat is confirmed even if he is an oppressor, if he is an open sinner, and he is ignorant. In other words, what was happening now is a statement to cover the sins of everyone and say even Yazid can be ulil amr, and obedience to him is like obedience to the Prophet. The corollary to that is that today the Muslims who say radiyallahu an after the name of Yazid, those who say this, they also say that Imam Hussein was wrong in rising against Yazid. Why? Because you cannot rise against an Imam وَلَوْ كَانَ فَاسِقًا أَوْ جَاهِلًا. So Hussein did not know all those ahadith of his grandfather, that even if the leader usurps your rights and hits you and whips you, isma' wa ati, listen and obey. But these people know that Hussein was wrong. So I make a few observations and then I have ended, I promise. The first thing we want to summarize for tonight, because we said tonight we're discussing Imamah from a theological perspective, tomorrow from a history perspective. The first thing we want to confirm again is that the concept of Imamat very, very much exists in all the Muslims, Shia and Sunni. Okay? The last time, a couple of years back, I did a search on the internet on the concept of Imamat in Quran. I found an article by an individual who claims he was a Shia and then he became a Sunni. And in that article he writes, he says, I was a Shia and I know how to debate with the Shias. And he says, when you want to defeat the Shias, don't argue with them about anything. Don't argue with them about the right of khilafah, about Ghadir, about the marriage of mut'ah, about this or that. You will fail. The only way to fight the Shias is tell them that Imamat is something you innovated. There is no place for it in Islam. Now obviously he changed too soon because he's not aware of all these theologians and their opinions. But Imamat is very much a belief in all Muslims. Yes, we disagree on the qualities of an Imam. If you tell me as a non-Shia that you Shias believe your Imams are infallible, that I accept. And there are reasons why we believe that. And we will be happy to share those reasons with you. But don't tell me that Muslims do not believe in the concept of Imamat. They are talking about it and using the word Imamat, 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 not Khilafat only. That is number one. Number two, as we have seen, the rules of how an Imam gets elected were reverse engineered. Do you understand the term reverse engineered? Meaning, instead of setting the rules and saying these are the qualities of an Imam and then saying who fits this bill, does Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam fit this bill that he should be our Imam? The way it was done was the other way around. Look who became the Imams. And then whoever became the Imams, look at their qualities. Those are the qualities and the prerequisites of an Imam. This reminds me of the saying that says, if you never want to be wrong, shoot your arrow first, and then whatever you hit, you call that your target. You can never be wrong, because whatever you hit will be bullseye. It's a bit like me and hockey, right? I don't understand the game, but my team always wins. Because I don't start cheering like the rest of you before the game starts, and right? I wait and see who's winning. Whoever's winning, that's my team, right? This is very important to understand how these concepts came into being. Now, I want to say just one thing, and listen to this, how beautifully things work. Look at Allah's power, how He makes things come to be. You will be amazed if you have never thought of this point. There are two opinions now in Muslims. Either the Prophet appointed someone, or he didn't appoint someone. Those who say he appointed someone, they say he appointed Ali bin Abi Talib. There is not a single there is not a single person who mentions any other name besides the name of Ali. If there is any Muslim of any madhab, of any sect, who believes that the Prophet appointed someone, they only believe it was Ali. There is no second name that is given out in history, that the Prophet mentioned this person, right? So if you go by those who say the Prophet appointed someone, then the name is Ali. If you go by those who say the Prophet did not appoint someone, their initial premise is that the Prophet did not appoint someone because he wanted the ummah to decide who to appoint. The ummah to come together and unanimously vote for one person. Now the irony and the beauty of this thing is that even by that yardstick, the only person who qualifies is Ali. Think about this for a minute. The Caliph Abu Bakr, I told you. Okay, we're not here to curse, abuse anybody. This is history. The Caliph Abu Bakr was chosen at Saqifa amidst a lot of disagreement. There was no unanimity there. Because Sa'ad bin Ubadah, a very prominent member and Sahaba, was opposing it. His son Qais opposed it. Habab bin Munzir, who was there, opposed it. Zubair bin al-Awam opposed it. Imam Ali opposed it. The Banu Hashim opposed it. The Khazraj tribe opposed it. So there was no unanimous vote for him. The Caliph Umar was appointed by Abu Bakr on his deathbed. So there was no, again, unanimous vote by the Muslims. The Caliph Uthman was appointed by Shura with 5 or 6 people. Now the Caliph Uthman was murdered and he did not stay for any time. He died immediately. So there was no time for him to appoint anyone. The Muslims thronged at the door of Ali and said, you have to be our Caliph and our Imam. And he said, wait for 3 days and think about it. After 3 days, they still came to his door to the point that Ali says in Nahjul Balagha, they almost crushed my toes. After Ali, there was again never a vote like this for the Banu Umayyah and Banu Abbas. The only person who opposed Ali was Muawiyah in Damascus, but all the other Muslim regions voted for him. So even if you go by the measure that the Prophet did not appoint anyone, and he wanted the Muslims to unanimously decide on someone, out of all the caliphs who have come in Islamic history, the only person who fit that bill was Ali bin Abi Talib.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.